Hey, fourth graders, happy Thursday. Today we're going to be working with that protractor, that tool that is super awesome in terms of finding the measurement of angles exactly, because otherwise we'd be stuck in just estimating them all the time. But you should have a protractor with you today, an actual physical one. This is one that I just have with me because later on we're going to use this to measure angles in our packet. If you do not have a protractor, it should be in your math kit. If you're in the building, I know I've left some protractors in a box that you can borrow, but each and every one of you has your very own protractor in that math kit. So take that out now. Also, today you're going to, just as a heads up, you're going to have a very short quiz at the end of our lesson, in addition to your Throwback Thursday. So our lesson's actually going to be quite short today in comparison to the other 2 days that we've had so far on Edpuzzle. So yay! And then you'll do your quiz, and then you also have your Throwback Thursday and graph your score. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. All right, so we've been practicing this all week long, something that I definitely want you to get better and better at as you memorize. If I was to ask you some questions, here they come. Hopefully you did well on those questions as we still try and memorize how fractions are related to degrees and circles. And let's go to page 15 in your packet to get us started. So this is a good review of what we covered on Tuesday and what you worked on yesterday on your asynchronous day with practice on the boom deck. Hopefully you did well on the boom deck because this is going to help you be more successful on the quiz today as well. All right, so now that you open up to page 15, you should see something that looks like this. I obviously am zoomed in on each individual question because I want it to be nice and large for you all. But taking a look at this angle, remember we always want to determine if it is acute, right, obtuse, or straight. So in this case, we would say that this is an acute angle, right, because it measures less than 90 degrees. You can see that. And then you have to look and see where does it intersect, right? Intersects right here on the protractor, that ray that's up in the air. You know, you have your bottom ray down on the bottom in line with the 0. That vertex is right in the center. And then it looks like it's going through the 70 or the 110. Now, obviously, if it's an acute angle, we would say not only is it less than 90, but we can say that it's exactly 70 degrees then, right? Because it obviously can't be 110 because that would be an obtuse measurement. All right, let's look at number 2. Go ahead, determine is it acute, right, obtuse, or straight? Aros is what I typically call it. Go ahead and write your letter on your paper. This is an obtuse angle because it measures greater than 90 degrees but less than 180. And so that bottom ray is already in line with the 0. It's opened up all the way to, it looks like, either 40 or 140 degrees. Now, obviously, since it's obtuse, only one of those makes sense. Which of them is it? That would be 140 degrees. Nice. Number 3. All right. First things first, double check. Is that acute, right, obtuse, or straight? We would say this is an acute angle because it's less than 90 degrees. If you notice, there are the small set of numbers, the larger set of numbers, and it's not even actually on one of the numbers themselves, right? It's in between some numbers. So I automatically know it's not in between 150 or 160, so I'm actually scribbling them out right now. I know it's in between 20 and 30. Now, if it's in between 20 and 30, I can see that it's halfway in between 20 and 30. If I was to count the individual tick marks, I would start at 20, go 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and this would be 25 degrees. Notice how it's halfway in between 20 and 30, so that makes sense. That's 25 degrees, and it makes sense because it's acute. All right, moving on. Number 4. This is the last one I'm going to do with you, and then I want to see how you do on the other ones on your own. So first things first, ROs, acute, right, obtuse, or straight. We would say that this is an obtuse angle measurement. And I noticed that it's obviously in between either 50 and 60 or 120 and 130. It can't be 50 and 60 if it's truly obtuse, right? And then I know it's in between 120 and 130. Now, I'm counting from 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. I'm going to count 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, 126, 127. Do you notice that here is the halfway point? That'd be 125, and it's 2 degrees to the left of that. So we would say that's 127 degrees. Those are the trickiest problems I can possibly ask you, right? It's not exactly on one of the whole numbers that's already labeled on the protractor. It's also not on the halfway point either. And counting those individual tick marks is good that it's on a piece of paper, because let me just tell you, what I just had to do on the computer is a heck of a lot harder than on a piece of paper. So it's good that you have that piece of paper in front of you so you can count those individual tick marks. And that is 7 degrees away from the 120 degree mark, and it's only 3 degrees less than the 130 degree mark. A lot of times kids get a little bit mixed up and they might say that's like 133 degrees, but that means they're counting in the wrong direction, right? 133 degrees is not in between 120 and 130. And that is the most common mistake that kids make on assessments. So be very careful with that. All right, so now let's see how you do on number 5 and number 6 on your own. Give you some time to identify if it's acute, right, obtuse, or straight, and then also the angle. You're doing number 5 and number 6 right now. We'll go over each of them in about 2 minutes. Should be done with number 5, possibly on number 6. Fifteen more seconds. All right, I know that wasn't exactly 2 minutes, but that should be enough time for you to figure this out. So let's go over number 5 and number 6. Even if you're not done, this is just practice, right? So number 5, this is an obtuse angle measurement. Notice how it's way larger than 90, almost 180 degrees, right? So here I'm going to ignore, since it's an obtuse angle measurement, I'm going to ignore the 10 and the 20 that it's in between. And I can already tell it's in between 160 and 170, right? So I know that this tick mark right here is 170. I can basically count back 4 degrees from 170, or I can count up 6 degrees from 160. And either way, I would be getting 166 degrees for number 5. If you said 167, I might give it to you as well, just because the thickness of the ray is a little harder to tell. Usually I give a little bit of leeway, like a 1 degree or so, but if you said like 174 or something like that, you're way off. It's in between 160 and 170. Let's go over number 6. Number 6 is an acute angle. It's less than 90 degrees. I noticed that it can't be in between 140 and 150 if it's acute, of course, right? So it's in between 30 and 40. Here's my 30-degree tick mark. Here's my 40-degree tick mark. So if I'm counting, here's my 35-degree tick mark. So I would say 35, 36, 37. I'd probably say 38 degrees on this one. Again, if you're like 1 degree off, I would probably still give it to you. Especially when it comes to multiple choice, it'll be fairly obvious which one it is. As long as you're not saying something that's higher than 40 degrees or less than 30 degrees, you're probably in the right ballpark. So I wouldn't get overly particular about the exact degree measurement, especially because it's super small on your paper. I like it when the protractor is a lot larger and it's a lot easier to see because a 1 degree is so small, right? There's a 360 1-degree angles going all the way around in a whole circle. So it's possible to get a little bit stuck or confused. All right, so hopefully you did well on number 5 and number 6. On the very bottom of your paper, it says, explain how identifying the type of angle can help you find its exact angle measurement. So here, I want us to think about how identifying if it's acute, right, obtuse, or straight could be helpful. So go ahead and come up with a response. Take about a minute to write a sentence or two about how it's helpful to identify if it's acute, right, obtuse, or straight, and how that helps you when you're reading a protractor to find the exact angle measurement. I know you may or may not be done writing your sentence out, but just something to think about is identifying the type of angle can help determine which set of numbers on the protractor to be looking at. So I gotta shrink this down. So like, for example, you don't have to have my exact response. This is something that I am saying is a possibility. So like, for example, if the angle was acute, a measurement that is greater than 90 degrees would not make sense. All acute angles are less than 90 degrees. I know I'm typing kind of quickly. I can actually type almost as fast as I can speak. But you have to have something along those lines, right? So identifying the type of angle is going to help you identify, how large or small the degrees is going to be, right? So it makes perfect sense that an acute angle is going to be less than 90. Does not make sense at all to say that, this acute angle measures 145 degrees. What? That makes no sense, right? So it's always helpful to identify that, and I'm going to expect that whenever you are doing like an assessment, that you identify as an acute, right, obtuse, or straight, ROS, and then move from there. All right. Now, you're not going to need your packet for just a little bit of time. I'm going to start firing some multiple choice questions at you through Edpuzzle. So it's not necessarily based on speed at all. I want you to be as accurate as possible, right? So if you have to think really hard about it, think. Take your time, right? I much prefer that you're accurate than going through these quickly. So what type of angle is this? This is an acute angle because it measures less than 90 degrees. How many degrees would you say that acute angle is? Well, this angle, the ray goes straight through either the 80-degree mark or the 100 degree mark. Obviously, if it's an acute angle, right, it cannot measure 100 degrees then. Because 100 degrees is larger than a right angle. An acute angle is less than a right angle. So we would say it's an 80 degrees. All right, next question. What type of angle is this? Hopefully you said obtuse, right? It is larger than 90 degrees. Here's the 90 degree mark of my squiggly 90 degree mark. You can see that is way greater than a 90 degree or right angle. How many degrees is this angle? Now, being that it's obtuse, right, it's either going to go through the 60 or the 120 degree mark, right? Well, obviously it can't be 60 degrees because that would be acute. The only measurement left, therefore, is 120 degrees. That should make sense to you because guess what? Here's the 90 degree mark. Ugh, that squiggly line. That's the 90 degree mark. That's 90 right there, right? Then you add another 10, 20, 30, 90 plus 30. This right here is 30 degrees, right? 30 plus 90 would give you 120 degrees. What type of angle is this? I love those questions, right? That's a right angle. It makes a perfect square corner, right? Exactly 90 degrees. How many degrees is this angle? Well, I just gave you the answer a few seconds ago. So if you didn't say 90 degrees, you're not listening. What type of angle is this? Is that acute, right? Obtuse? Straight? Hopefully you said straight on this one. Straight angles are like a perfect line, right? And how many degrees is a straight angle? Hopefully you said 180 degrees. All straight angles are 180 degrees. Do you notice that if this is a right angle, right? This is a right angle. There's my square corner. Then this also over here is a right angle, right? If you were measuring from here to here. So that's 90 plus 90, which is 180 degrees, right? If you take your 2/4 of a circle, right, and put them together, 2/4 is the same thing as a half. Half a circle is 180 degrees. A fourth of a circle is 90, but if you have two of them, right, that would be 180 degrees. All right, what type of angle is this? Hopefully you said obtuse. How many degrees is this angle? Well, if it is, see how it's going through the 30 degrees and the 150 degrees, the only way I can tell that is because I'm looking at the left and right of where that ray is going because I can see that the yellow ray is kind of cutting off some of those digits in the number. It's annoying. But you can kind of see, oh, well, that's 20 and that's 40, so therefore this would be 30. That's 140, that's 160, so therefore this is 150. Now, if it's truly obtuse, right, then it obviously can't be 30 degrees. It's got to be 150 degrees. All right. What type of angle is this? Hopefully, again, you said obtuse. It's larger than 90 degrees. How many degrees is this angle? Again, hopefully you're doing better and better with this. You can see that it's greater than 90 degrees. Obviously, it's obtuse. But this is where it gets a little tricky, right? It's not going through one of those whole numbers that's on the protractor, and that can be a little bit annoying. However, since we know it's obtuse, we know we're not looking at any of the smaller set of numbers, right? Because it's got to be bigger than 90. So how could it be 70 something or 80 something? We know it's in between 100 and 110. Now here's my advice to you. You can start counting 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, and count the little tick marks 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, or just know that 105 is halfway in between 100 and 110, right? So this from here to here is 105 degrees. And again, that should make sense to you because here's the 90-degree mark, my little squiggly 90-degree mark. Ugh. And then you can see that if that's 90 plus, you can see that this from here to here is 10 degrees, plus another 5, 90 plus 15, that's 105 degrees. What type of angle is this? Hopefully you said acute because it's less than 90 degrees. How many degrees is this angle? Now again, if we truly know it's acute, we should not even be looking at the higher numbers, right? You can see that it's in between 40 and 50. Now here's the most common mistake that kids do. They look at 50 and they go, oh, I'm going to count over from 50. 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. You're counting in the wrong direction. You cannot do that. 55 is over here. Last I checked, 55 is halfway in between 50 and 60. So it's definitely not 55. This would be 45, right? Because it's halfway in between 40 and 50. You're counting 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, and then you have 45, which would be halfway in between 40 and 50. You can also go 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. See that? That is, as you can see, halfway. Gosh. Woo! Drawing straight lines is a hard thing for Mr. Hogan today. That would be halfway in between a right angle, right? Half of 90 is 45 degrees. What type of angle is this? Again, this would be an acute angle. It's less than 90 degrees. That's not the hard question. The harder question is this. How many degrees is this angle? Now, if it's truly acute, right? Acute, right? I meant to say acute, correct, right? I keep saying right. Sorry, acute. It's acute. So if it's acute, we're not looking at the 130 or the 120. Those are obtuse angle measurements. It's in between the 50 and the 60. Now, for those of you who said 62 degrees, you did exactly what I said not to do on that last question. You're not counting 61, 62. You're supposed to be counting backwards from 60, right? If it's in between 50 and 60, how does 62 even make any sense, right? So 62 would be right here. But we're not looking at that section over there. We're looking at in between 50 and 60. If you wanted to, you could count, okay, here's 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58 degrees is what I would say this angle measurement is, which should make sense because it's 2 degrees less than 60. What type of angle is this? Hopefully you said obtuse, right? Is larger than 90 degrees. How many degrees is this angle, this obtuse angle that we just talked about? Ignore the 20 and the 30, right? Those are acute measurements. Instead, I'm looking at the 150 to the 160. Now, if it's truly in between 150 and 160, I know that this tick mark right here is 150, or 155, sorry, 155, because it's halfway in between 150 and 160. Then I can go, okay, that's 155, 156, 157 is probably what I would say. Again, a little bit of leeway. Leeway basically means like a little flexibility, right? I could say, 158 maybe, 156 maybe, depending on how your eyes are looking at it. But I would say the best measurement is probably 157 because here's 160. This would be 159. This would be 158. And then 157 would be where I can't see, right? Where the ray is covering up. So why exactly are there these two sets of numbers on a protractor? Isn't that kind of annoying? Well, it all depends on how the angle's opened up, right? If the angle's opened up, from the right side, the bottom ray is on the right side, and the ray is over here, you're going to be needing those obtuse angle measurements. But let's say it's on the left side, that bottom ray, and it's opened up only to like the 60-degree mark, right? Then you need to be looking at the acute measurements. It's all dependent on, are you looking at an acute angle? Are you looking at an obtuse angle? That's why you have to be careful about identifying the type of angle first, because that determines which set of numbers on the protractor you should be looking at. All right, last thing that we're going to do together is page 16. Page 16 is where you're going to need that protractor, like I said at the beginning of class, that you would need. So I'm going to be pulling on my Elmo here because I cannot put a protractor on top of this piece of paper digitally. It's a pain in the neck. So I'm going to pull up my Elmo here. I want you to turn to page 16 as I'm doing so. Zoom in nice and close. All right. So on this page, we're going to identify if it's acute, obtuse, or right. And then we're going to use our protractor to measure the exact angle measurement. So, as always, we start out with ROs. Take a look at A. Is it acute, obtuse, right, straight? We would say it's obtuse, right? So if it's obtuse, we're looking at measurements that are greater than 90 degrees but less than 180. I know for a fact, I'm just using my protractor. I'm going to draw the 90-degree mark. This is something that I oftentimes advise students to do as well, especially when they're trying to estimate how many degrees this angle is. So like here's the 90-degree angle, and then you can see that's a little bit more than that, right? So if I'm looking at this, I know that, here is where the 180-degree mark would be. I can see that it is greater than 90 but less than 180, right? So now I'm going to estimate how many degrees this actually is. So I can see that, here would be, if I had my protractor, this is where I think the 135-degree mark would probably be. It's about halfway in between 90 and 180. Remember how we talked about that? 135 degrees is the halfway point. But it looks like it's a little bit less than that, right? So again, I'm still estimating a little bit, but I would probably say this is an angle that's probably around 130 degrees then, right? It's a little bit less than 135. Now let's go ahead and try and measure this. Now, if you remember, the first step in measuring is to find your vertex. Your vertex is the shared endpoint of the two rays. Now, I know that the rays on this paper do not have the arrows, but we can pretend like they are there. Okay. You want to put the center point of your protractor on top of the vertex. Now, everybody's protractor is probably going to be a little bit different unless you have the one from the math kit. I don't actually know which one is in the math kit. I have so many different protractors in my room though. I have ones that, here's the center point. It's got this little like target. Super cool. I have one that looks like this where they intersect. That's the center point. I have a large protractor that literally has a hole for me to find and put on top of my vertex. I love that. The only thing about this is that this protractor is pretty large in comparison to the small ones. There's nothing wrong with a large protractor. The only thing is that you have to extend the rays, right? Make them a little bit longer. When you extend the rays, you're not changing the angle measurement as we talked about earlier in the week. So if you have a large protractor, sometimes you do have to extend the rays, but again, that doesn't change the amount of turn in between those two rays, right? And that's the whole definition of an angle. So I'm going to use the small one because that way I don't have to extend any of the rays. But if you do have to extend the rays, basically you would use that flat edge, almost like a ruler essentially, and just extend the rays so that they go a little bit further, all right? So step one, find the vertex, put it on the center point of your protractor. On mine, it just happens to be the intersection of the two red lines. Now, obviously, you could put your protractor like this and have it on the center point. But step two is to make sure that the 0 on your protractor the tick mark for 0, is in line with your bottom ray. Okay, so here's my 0. My bottom ray is now going directly through the 0. Now be careful that you don't somehow get off of the vertex. So here's my vertex, right? Now I'm no longer on the center point of my protractor. So you have to make sure both are true. Not only are you on top of the vertex, but you're also going through the 0. So now that I've done that, I have it going through the vertex. I have it going through the 0 for my bottom ray. Now I can look at where the other ray is going through. Now the thickness of the ray will kind of throw us off a little bit. And depending on how accurate you were when you were putting the protractor, we can be a little bit off. So don't try and match me exactly. I'll give you a range of what I would typically accept. So I can see, that's going through the 50, in between the 50 and the 60, or in between the 120 and the 130. Now, obviously, I'm going to ignore the 50 and the 60 because those are acute angle measurements, right? So I'm just looking at in between 120 and 130. Now, here's the 125 degree tick mark because it's the halfway point in between 120 and 130. I could count 125, 126, 127. For me, it's looking like it's on the 128 degree tick mark. Now, I know that's insanely difficult to sometimes find, but if I zoom in, you can kind of see on mine, here's 125, here's 126, 127. I can see those tick marks. I can't see the 127 or 128 tick mark because it looks like the ray is going right through it. This would be 129 and that would be 130. So I would say that this angle is 128 degrees. Now, when you go and you measure yours, although we're talking about the same angle, because we're human beings, we can be a little bit off in terms of how we place the protractor. So I typically give students some what I call leeway. You get 5-degree leeway when you're measuring an angle with a protractor. That's one of the hardest things to do with angles. So what I mean by that is you get 5 degrees above what I said or 5 degrees below what I said. So for example, I said 128, you would add 5 degrees to that. You have basically 129 degrees would be acceptable, 130 degrees, 131, 132, 133. That's 5 degrees above. So 133 would be the maximum I would allow. And then if you're going 5 degrees below, you can have like 127, 126, 125, 124, 123 degrees would all be acceptable as well. But anything less than that would therefore be incorrect. Okay, so this is something that is going to take some time. I kind of make it look a little bit easier just because I've been doing it for so long. And especially when it comes to estimating the angles, I've had so much practice in identifying, how many degrees I think that might be. And I have not done this worksheet since last year, honestly. So it's not like I remembered the exact measurements anyways. Let's go ahead to letter B. Type of angle. We would say it's an acute angle because it's less than 90 degrees. Now, when I go and try and make an estimation in my head, and so I want you to get in the habit of doing that because not only is that on your quiz today, but also sometimes, you won't have a protractor. Like on the EOGs, they don't allow you to have a protractor. And that can be like so frustrating because it's like the protractor makes my life so much easier. I can find the exact measurements. Sometimes you have to find the estimated or what you think it is. So sometimes it's helpful. You would have a straight edge on the EOGs or whatever, like a piece of paper or something to give you a straight mark. That's the 90 degree mark, right? I can see that it's in between the 0, here's 90, right? If this ray was on top of this one, this would be the 0 degree mark, this would be the 90 degree mark. I already know that the halfway point between 0 and 90 is about 45. It looks to me like it's a little bit larger than 45. So I'm going to make a guess and say, well, maybe like 50 degrees, right? So again, that's just an estimation. I could be totally wrong, but I'm going to go ahead and use my protractor to see how close I was. So here's my vertex. I'm going to put my center point on top of the vertex. Step 2 is to make sure the bottom ray goes in line with the 0. It does. Again, I'm making this look a little bit easier, or maybe I'm going a little fast. So you can always pause the video if I am going too quickly. And I can see, wow, would you look at that? My angle is that ray is going right through the 50. So I actually was dead on when I made my estimation. It's 50 or 130. Obviously, it can't be 130 because it's an acute angle measurement, so I would say 50 degrees. Again, you have 5 degrees above or 5 degrees below that I would accept. So like all the way up to 55 or all the way down to 45 would be acceptable. You should get better and better as we go. Again, pause if you need to, right? I'm going through kind of quickly because it's a video, but something that you definitely want to practice and get better at. So don't just like give up or just say, I can't do this or whatever. All right, letter C. We would say this is an acute angle. It's definitely going to be less than 50 degrees, right? So when I'm going to estimate my angle, I know it's not going to be anything higher than 50. And it's definitely not going to be anything higher than 90 because it's an acute angle, right? So I'm going to think about, well, here's what a right angle would be. Here's where I think 45 degrees, about halfway in between those two rays, right? It's not anything close to 45. It's way closer to 0 than it is 45. So here's where you have to kind of take a little bit of a guess. 22 and a half would actually be half of 45, right? So 22 and a half would be around here. It's even less than 22 and a half then. So maybe like 15 degrees, maybe 10, I don't know. I would say maybe like 15. It looks a little bit larger than 10. Okay, so there's my prediction. Let's go ahead and take our protractor and measure it. Find your vertex, make a little point on there. Line it up with the center of your protractor. Line up the 0 with the bottom ray. Might take a little bit of moving. I oftentimes, once I get it where I want, I put a lot of pressure with one hand so that I don't accidentally bump it. So see, like this is like the slightest bump will throw off your angle degrees. Okay, so you really want to keep it steady as you go to measure that ray. So I usually like put a lot of pressure with one hand, and then I take a look with my eyes here. So it's in between 10 and 20 or 160 and 170. I know it can't be in between 160 and 170 because I already know it's way less than 22 and a half degrees, right? I've already said that. So can't be 160 anything. So look at the smaller set. It's in between 10 and 20. For me, technically, I would almost say that it's exactly halfway in between 10 and 20 based on my measurement. So halfway in between 10 and 20 is 15 degrees, which is what I actually was predicting. It's almost on mine, almost 14 degrees, but again, it doesn't really matter, right? You have to be 5 degrees above or 5 degrees below me. So 14 degrees would be acceptable. So don't worry so much about trying to be particular. And maybe even I am making the error in terms of finding the exact placement. But that's what I'm saying. Like, especially when it comes to like a multiple choice, you're not going to have, is it 15? Is it 14? Is it 13? Or is it 12? Gosh, that's terrible. That's mean and nasty. And even though the test creators are kind of mean and nasty, they're not going to do that. They're trying to figure out, you know, do you think it's 15? Do you think it's 95? Right? They're going to give you like kind of crazy measurements, all this kind of stuff. So, all right, let's look at D, E, and F. I actually want you to do D, E, and F on your own. So you're going to identify ROs, A, R, O, or S first for each of them, and then also find out the exact angle measurements. If I were you, but I also practice a little bit right now, estimating how many degrees you think it is. So you kind of test your ability right now, your skills, without using a protractor. But in the end, I want you to use a protractor. So I'm going to give you, you got 3 problems here. I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes. So go ahead and get to work on that. I'll obviously go over the answers in a little bit, but I don't want you to give up. I want you to persevere as you go through. Now, if for whatever reason you don't have a protractor, you're just stuck estimating then, right? So this is going to be a little bit harder. A minute and a half. Twenty more seconds. I'm going to go over the 3. If you need to pause so you can finish, that's fine. All right, letter D. I already identified that as an obtuse angle, so it's bigger than 90 degrees but less than 180. We go ahead and measure. Again, you have to be 5 degrees above or below me or exact, okay? Or within that range anyways. So it looks like it's in between 150 and 160 on mine. And the halfway point would be 155. So I say 155, 156. I'm going to say 157 degrees is what I'm getting here. 157 degrees, you get either 158, 159, 160, or 61, 162. Those are all acceptable. Or drop 5 degrees below all the way down to 152, right? Those are all acceptable as well. Hopefully you did pretty well on that. If not, you know, this is definitely a skill. It's going to take some time, so don't beat yourself up over it. Letter E, obtuse angle. Put on the vertex, lining up my bottom ray. It looks like, since it's obtuse, I'm looking at in between 100 and 110. 100, 101, 102, 103 degrees is what I'm getting here. So again, you get 5 degrees above, 5 degrees below, or maybe you got exactly what I did, 103. Obviously, your measurement has to be in between 100 and 110. So if you said like 117, you're counting in the wrong direction. You cannot do that. Ask yourself, does my answer make sense? Is it in between 100 and 110? Last I checked, 117 is in between. So careful on that. Letter F, acute angle. Definitely less than 90. Again, does my answer make sense? In the end, if I get 158, that's automatically wrong, right? It's got to be less than 90. Lining up on the vertex, 0 lined up with the bottom ray. Looks like it's going exactly halfway in between 40 and 50 on mine. This is exactly 45 degrees then. And if that's truly exactly 45 degrees, then if I was to draw a right angle, it would be exactly halfway in between. And yes, that does look like it. So hopefully you did okay in those bottom 3. Using a protractor is a skill that's going to take some time. You can just practice by drawing, you know, rays, like here's a ray, and then, you know, here's a ray, and you can just practice making your own angles and then measuring them using a straight edge, of course, which is why I oftentimes use a straight edge on the protractor. All right, that's everything that I had to share with you. Like I said, you're going to have a very short protractor quiz before you go into your Throwback Thursday. So I ended our lesson a little bit earlier than the other days so far this week, so that you can work on the protractor quiz. If you've been following along with everything that I've gone through so far, the protractor quiz should be not that bad. Now, it might be easy, but it is also very easy to make a silly mistake. So don't just rush through it all, because as you can tell from what we did today, you have to ask yourself, does my answer make sense? If it's in between 50 and 60 and I'm getting 65, that makes no sense at all, right? Or if you say it's acute and then you say, oh, I got 178 degrees, what the heck? That makes no sense, right? So here is your protractor quiz. You can read through that. That's basically what I was just literally saying. You're going to type in your name. There are 10 questions on here. So I'm basically testing, do you know acute, right, obtuse, or straight on some of them? So you don't even have to tell me the exact measurement, but you're just saying is acute, right, obtuse, or straight for the first 3 problems. You're doing that. Oh no, 1, 2, well, first 2 problems, sorry. Then you're going to identify the angle measurement. So obviously I still want you to figure out, is it acute, right, obtuse, or straight? You're just not recording it. You're not actually going to submit a photo of your work because a lot of this is, I mean, if you think about it, you're doing a lot of mental math. You're thinking about, is acute, right, obtuse, or straight? If you had a piece of paper, it might not be a bad idea to jot that down, acute, right, obtuse, or straight, but I'm not collecting that. Like for example, if you think that this is an acute angle, right, there's definitely some of these measurements that should be eliminated. There's no way that it can be 115 or 105. I gave you a nice little hint there. It's either going to be 65 or 75. Well, look at your angles and where the ray goes through. It's in between 60 and 70, right? It's halfway in between 60 and 70. So think, which one of these is halfway in between 60 and 70? I'm pretty much giving you a free answer. You're welcome. Happy birthday, even though it might not be your birthday. Keep going through some of them. You know, the tick mark might be covered up by the ray, and you're going to have to count a little bit. It might not be a bad idea to take like a very small tip to help you count those little tick marks. Your finger is going to be too big to really count them, or use your mouse tip like I'm doing and counting very slowly. Obviously, you're always going to have some that you can eliminate because if it's acute, right, obtuse, or straight. So you're going to go through, that's pretty much the rest of this quiz is just identifying. Some of them are going to be really easy because it goes right on the line. Some of them are going to be on the smaller tick marks, so just be very careful though. I've had so many students ace this thing, but I've also had students make some very silly mistakes in the past. Now the last 2 questions are going to be estimating angles. So you might have to tilt your head a little bit on this one, but identify is it acute, right, obtuse, or straight, because that will help you eliminate some of these choices. Like for example, I already know what kind of angle it is. I'm eliminating 2 of those choices right now. And then I have to determine, you know, is that closer to 90 degrees? Is it closer to 0 degrees? Is it about the halfway point of 45 degrees, right? Think about that as you try and measure, and you're estimating, right? So you're not going to actually use a protractor on this. There's not a protractor on your screen. So you're estimating. Use process of elimination. And same thing with this one. Identify, is it acute, obtuse, right, or straight? And then identify the angle measurement based on your best judgment. Okay? So that's your protractor quiz. Then you have your Throwback Thursday, number 6. Remember, for this, there's 8 problems. You must show your work. You're going to be actually submitting a photo of your work in the Google form. If you need to, you can watch the how-to video to refresh yourself on that. And then you're going to graph your score. Remember, you're graphing your score for number 6, right? So you've done number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. Now you're doing number 6. Hopefully your score is either improving or doing about the same, right? We don't want to be dropping. We're reviewing and getting better and better. Do your very best on both of those. The quiz and the Throwback Thursday, you have the rest of class to do that. If you end up finishing early, then you can work on your Dreambox lessons. Remember, you have 5 Dreambox lessons for the week. So make sure that those are going to be due tomorrow. You can see that that's on your week at a glance. So thanks for working hard today, and I'll be on video again tomorrow, but I'll be back on Monday of next week.